coming through pretty fast. I'm already up to the end of the book of Exodus there. Tomorrow I'll come 32, 33. I love that section. That's where Moses goes. It's the where the dash is. Exodus 32. It's the only verse in the Bible where it's not complete. And Moses is crying out to God because the children of Israel have sinned with Aaron making the golden calves. And Moses is pleading with God, please don't destroy him. And it just stops. And there's the dash. He just, no end of the sentence. And I believe with all my heart, he just breaks down. I think he just broke down underneath the weight of that. I don't know about you, but I've had so many times of that in prayer. I'm crying out for someone else. I'm crying out for the things I'm seeing and things are going on, and I can't stand it. Again, then I start to quiver, and then I start to weep, and I'm trying to pray through the tears and the snot, and I just like broke down, and all of a sudden I just stop, and I'm just like, Lord, you know my heart, and I just can't say anything else. All I can do is weep. I had a moment like that out there at the conference Thursday night, our first night. We did the concert of prayer Thursday afternoon and Friday. Trying to think. Thursday night, I got up and I was moderating it, and just before the speaker was up, I could feel the spirit. The spirit was moving that night, and I didn't want to go forward. I just wanted to. I didn't want to move. I was afraid. I was so delicate that I was afraid to do anything because I was afraid the spirit would leave. And I'm just sitting there and I'm arguing with God. I watched this on the video because again I'm just standing there, so you can't tell what's going on in the pea brain up here. But in my mind, I'm Lord. I don't want to move. I don't want to go forward. And I just wanted to weep. I just wanted to break down and weep. But eventually I was like, no, Lord, give me a release or I'm not going to move. So seconds elapsed, seemed like minutes, seemed like hours, but minutes elapsed, and I finally went forward with it in the midst of that. But while I was out there, I was able to share much of what I presented to you over the years. I preached Second Chronicles 36 till there was no remedy, and I took them through all of that. And one part of this, back in here in Exodus, Bible readings you come through. We spent what 40 years in going through Exodus 1 through 20. I took Bible study Thursday nights, and we walked through Genesis through Exodus right up to Exodus 20, because Exodus 20 is what? Ten Commandments. So, but 7 through 12 is the 10 plagues. Now, again, you got a children's class, you got young adult class, senior adult class. I don't care. And you sit down and you say, tell me what the 10 plagues are in order. No, don't guess and hit miss all around. And well, all the firstborn died. No, that's number 10. You can't get to 10 until you do the first 9. But go through the order of the 10 plagues. And I studied this a long time ago, and God speaking to me out of the midst of this. We know by reading the scriptures and studying that this was the way God was going to bring Israel out of Egypt. So you start in Exodus chapter 1, finishing up Genesis chapter 50. Joseph dies, and all of his brethren. 110 years old he was. And he said, God will surely visit you. And when he does, he will bring you out, bring you into the promised land. You are to carry my bones to the promised land and bury them with my father. So 400 years goes by. 3 to 5 generations has elapsed. I don't know if you pay attention to that or not, but I like those generational movings over 400 years. But you start in Genesis or in Exodus chapter 1, 70 went down into Egypt, 70. And now after 400 years, here in Exodus chapter 7, when the plagues start, there are over 600,000, 603,550 men. But understanding what God did here to Egypt is almost parallel to me when I'm studying the judgments of our day, what's going on. Just like I said, we sat and we watched, or we've seen footage of Hurricane Michael. And again, you saw it intensified to a Category 4 right before it hit. 155 mile an hour winds. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but as far as tornadoes, They show you what wind does at 70 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, 110. But 155, you saw what it did. Snapped trees, took roofs off, siding off. I mean, nothing was safe in that kind of extreme wind pattern. And just like a bulldozer had gone through where that thing come on shore, we have seen just in this year the devastation that goes on. Wildfires, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, all of that. Just land blasting, natural disasters we call them in this day and time. What we have not seen is this final ending where God says, okay, that's it. 10 plagues, count them down till you get to that last one, because the last one, nothing else was like it, was it? But the ones that started, and that's what I want to give to you today, as I went back over this and I was looking at them, I want to walk through the 10 plagues real quick, just because, again, one, you ought to know them if you don't. And you ought to know the severity of them, what they was doing. But again, the more important thing is that you see the handwriting on the wall. Where are we at? God's sending plagues on us even now. We don't call them plagues, we call them judgments. But what are the judgments that are on us right now? How severe are they? And where are we in lieu of being to number 10? Getting to the end. To me, we're crescendoing, climaxing to one final calamity. We've had our teeth rattled. We've had the air knocked out of us. 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, financial crisis, 2007, 2008, and that's all just in this century, the last 18 years. I said a year ago, worst mass shooting, 54 people, I think it was. Where are we going? And how near are we to it? That's the question on my mind. Where are we at in this? So you start off in chapter 7, and again, you know, God calls, Exodus chapter 3, God calls Moses in the burning bush, and he says, go down into Egypt and lead my people out in this. But he warns them, you have an obstacle, and there is always an obstacle, isn't there? Pharaoh. What was wrong with Pharaoh? God hardened his heart. You read that. The first couple times, God hardened his heart, but after that, he hardened his heart. Now again, somebody says, well, that's hardens his heart because nobody can undo what God does. God would never harden a man or a woman's heart if he didn't already know that their heart was hard, would he? Because God's desire is not for people to be like that. God's desire is that none should perish, none should go away from him. But we read, I raised you up for this, because he knew what he would be. He knew what Jezebel and Ahab would be. He knew about Judas. Judas is one of them that always bothers me probably the most, because he saw and heard everything of Christ and still betrayed him in that. But there's always that obstacle that God sets in front of the church, because Satan will not let us just go easily along our way. It may be a person, maybe an event, maybe a circumstance. But God is doing these things to get us to where we need to be. So in chapter 7, verse 20, we start, and so Moses and Aaron, as they did so as the Lord commanded, he lifted up the rod. He smote the waters that were in the rivers in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river, they were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died. The river stank. The Egyptians, they could not drink of the water of the river. And there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. Verse 22 now, key. And the magicians, they also of Egypt did so with their enchantments. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and neither did he hearken unto them as the Lord had said. Down in chapter 8, next one, the frogs. Verse 6. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up, and they covered the land of Egypt. Verse 7. And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and they brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. Number 3, the lice, verse 17. And they did so, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod, smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. And all the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there was lice upon man and upon beast. Verse 24, and the Lord did so, and there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh, into his servants' houses. Or do we want to say yellow jackets, Helen? In the servants' house, in all the land of Egypt. The land was corrupted by reason of the swarm of flies. Number 5, over into chapter 9, verse 6. And the Lord did the thing on the morrow, and the cattle of Egypt they died. But of the cattle of the children of Israel they died not. Number 6, the boils. Number 10, verse 10, sorry. And they took ashes of the furnace, and they stood before Pharaoh. And Moses sprinkled it up towards heaven, and it became a boil, breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast. Number 7, over in verse 23. And Moses stretched forth his rod towards heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. Number 8, chapter 10, verse 13. And Moses stretched forth his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind, they brought the locusts. And the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt, and they rested in all the coast of Egypt. Very grievous were they. And before them there was no such locusts as they, and neither after them shall there be such. Number 9, the darkness, verse 21. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out your hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. And so Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. They saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel, they had light in their dwellings. And then you got to wait till you get over to chapter 12, verse 29, the last one, of course, death. And so it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all the servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Now, I go back over those again to know it. What did God do? The activity of God, that's very important to me. But the answer to the question, why did God do it? And again, when I talk about our circumstances and our situations that's on our streets and on our land, this isn't something just overnight or all this is happening, but it's been a progressive understanding for decades for me, that I started watching earthquakes, and I started watching hurricane patterns, and I started watching the drug addictions, and I started watching the murder-suicides, and red flags would go up, and I was like, well, I'm beginning to see a pattern here with this. That's the reason the drug overdose death. I was able to mark it years ago to know that we was doubling in that for over the last 5 years. We've continued to double. Now again, we hit the high mark, 70,000. What was it? 500 and some. Not quite 71,000 deaths, but I do not expect as many drug overdose deaths for this year, 2018. And I only say that is because everybody's got that shot now that's been able to preserve a lot of life. But drug usage, it is still as rampant and still as addictive as ever before. And the only thing about that is that the government has now joined of saying, well, we don't want you just to stop. We're going to keep you on it, but we're also going to give you something to remedy it, to help you along the way in this. So nothing is solved. No issues are there. But the plague, the judgment of drugs, it's still everywhere, isn't it? It's still on us. So patterns. I see God's consistency in this. What's God doing? And I've walked through this before with you, especially when we did this on Thursday night. But you look at the beginning plagues. You look at the water being turned to blood. And the magicians could do so. And you think, well, nothing big about that. Look, men could do what God's doing. Turn the water to blood. But they suffered for a while, and all of us, you've seen with Hurricane Michael, how long are they going to be without electric? How long are they not going to have? And I saw 500 electric company trucks lined up, streaming down into those regions that have been affected in Florida and Georgia to get power back on. We have a storm. Our power's knocked out. We know it's not going to be months. It's not going to be years. It's going to be days or weeks, isn't it? At most a week. I don't know how long you've ever experienced without electric, but unless you go camping like Carl does, it's not a frequency for us. But the inconvenience of it. I'm going to be without water for a while. I'm going to be without electric for a while. Well, I can cope. It's not going to shatter my world and all that. I can live like this for a while. And that when we lost electric a couple of weeks ago, and I shared about that, the kids automatically we lit the oil lanterns, and they went and got the games that haven't been touched since Xbox and the other electric games. They went and got the whoever makes them, Mattel or whatever, and got the game boards out, and they started playing games. And it was lovely to see. Look, life does go on without electric. They survived.
And without cell phones.
And yeah, but we still had batteries, we still had Wi-Fi, so that was different. But in this inconvenience, water turned to blood. Pharaoh hardens his heart, nothing changes. Children of Israel are still captives, still slaves. Matter of fact, Pharaoh now comes out against them and says, we're really going to put the screws to you in this. So he sends the second plague. Now it starts to get a little bit more of an inconvenience. And again, nothing earth-shattering, nothing filled with real calamity, but it's still enough to put you out of your normalcy. Oh my air conditioner broke down. How will I ever live? How will I ever do? Oh my golly, McDonald's closed down. Oh, the world is coming to an end. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. And so you get frogs, and you get lights, and Georgie just loves doing this to me because I just cannot stand that. But come home. Oh, guess what's going around in the elementary school? Not just lice, but the super lice. The kind that the over-the-counter stuff doesn't kill. You got to go get a doctor's medication to treat it. But literally, one child in there jumping off of them onto the other kids. That's how bad in this that you see the homes and the kids that have to live like that. But it's just neglect. It's what we pray about the kids. Neglect that the parent didn't even care enough to check them. Comb their hair, wash, make sure they're bathed at night. That was one of the things I loved doing. I loved getting the kids. Okay, let's go get in the tub. Scrub-a-dub-dub. Had the little ducky and all that. I loved doing bath time. Man, I was good at it, too. It was just like running the car through the car wash, man. I mean, top to bottom. Here we go. Let's check the oil here. Just making sure they was clean. They was in pajamas, and they smelled good. And, I just loved that. Now you got kids today, and the parents don't even care. And they grow up in neglect and abuse. But you got the lice comes. The lice that affects, we'll take care of this. And again, men and their humanism, we'll take care of this. We can beat this. We can overcome this. And again, is that the heart of Pharaoh? Is that why his heart was hardened? I can beat God. I don't care what life throws at me. I can overcome it. Send your calamity, send your judgment, send your plague. I can beat this. So you got the water, you got the frogs, you've got the lights, you've got the flies. And as much of an inconvenience it is, I can beat it. But you get to that fifth one. And as I always said, it's like a boa constrictor. You ever watch one of them acting videos? And they just wrap around and they do what? Squeeze. I see the 10 plagues like this. You got the inconvenience of these things, and God's beginning to smack the Egyptians. You've got my people. I told you to let them go. You won't listen to me. Now you hardened your heart. Now you're going to feel the full force. But God just doesn't unload them on one get-go and cause them to correct their behavior. He sends it, a remedial judgment, a correction. Listen, look what's going on. We're being hit, and we don't see it. we don't understand it. You look at our nation now, same thing. You just don't see it. Oh, well, now we've got the drug issue under control. Oh, now we've got the cancer under control. Oh, now we've got the children under control. These sex trade and all this stuff. The LGBT and all the agenda and this kind of crazy stuff that's going on. You realize when you see these epidemics that I've called and termed them, how detrimental they are as they start to mount up because we didn't address it when it first started. So that it's not just dealing with flies, it's not just dealing with lice, it's not just dealing with frogs, it's not just dealing with inconveniences. Now it's impacting. So you get to the fifth one, and now you've got this death of the livestock. You know, and again, we see this happening. I don't know. I'm a little fearful about hunting this fall. I mean, warnings are going up everywhere now. Now look for the tuberculosis in the deer. What? I worry about tuberculosis in me. Now I got to worry about the deer that I kill. And what's the deer disease? The waste thing.
Waste disease.
And you got to worry about that. It's not even going to be healthy for me to kill a deer because I don't know what's inside of it in that. And then you eat it, and now what do you become? That's what you eat. But here again, God attacks the livestock. Almost every week you see another thing in the news, E. coli. This food being reclaimed, this food being sent back. And I'm talking about they just had E. coli in the meat. Tens of thousands of pounds of meat. And you look at that blizzard that they had out there about 2 years ago in North Dakota, Montana, South Dakota. Blizzard. Oh, I can't wait. But it hit, and it just buried the entire livestock. They found, after it melted away for months, it finally melted away, thousands of livestock that were killed in that. Now you think about it, this is God taking away our substance of food. Supply and demand. If I take it away from you, now what? You're going to be in need. You're going to be in want. Easily given, abundance. We're remembering the poor today. We're remembering the poverty today. And in a fell swoop, God could do what? He's showing us that we could become exactly the same because we have provoked God just like Pharaoh did, just like the Egyptians did. He's constricting. So the inconveniences have long passed of these issues that we've had to deal with. And he's constricting, and now you got death, and the livestock are taking away. And now they get to me, it seems like it's like driving a clutch, and you went from fourth gear to fifth gear. And now you're up in high gear because now it gets a little bit more detrimental because the next thing that hits is the not just hail. I mean, we watched the hailstorms with awe, but hail and fire. And it ran along the ground. And you know that this impacted lives. You know that the animals were killed and that men were killed and property was damaged. And it says that phrase there, and there was none like this before, nor since, nor after. Again, who else could do that but God? Look at all of our disasters, our natural disasters. Wildfires, record. Flooding down in Baltimore. Flooding, every week we had a flash flood warning just about in the last 2 months. Record, historic. Hurricanes, never had a Category 4 hit the Gulf Coast. On and on it goes with this. And again, I'm sitting there thinking, we're reliving the plagues of Egypt. And the warning signs are going off, and God's saying, I'm doing this because you're in a sinful nation that has legalized abortion, 70 million, and all the church now, all Kavanaugh's in there, and the Supreme Court's going to overturn it, and everything's going to be all right, and I still say it and will continue to say it. If it happens, praise the Lord, thank God, I'll rejoice in that day. But how do you atone for 70 million babies' blood spilt on the ground? God looks back at Cain and says, Cain, where's your brother? Am I my brother's keeper in arrogance? And God reprimands him right there on the spot, and he says what? Your brother's blood cries to me from the ground. Even when we are deer hunting and killing deer, what are you supposed to do when you shed the blood and the guts out? You're supposed to cover it. Because the life of God, God is life, is in the bloodstream. And when you shed blood, God's life is poured out on the ground, whether man or beast, and God requires it. He even says to the animals, when they kill us, an animal, I've never had to wrestle a grizzly bear, don't want to. I saw that idiot out there in Yellowstone fighting that bison, trying to get it, and that bison would have stomped him right into the ground. Never had that. But when an animal kills a man, God says, I require the blood of man shed by the animal. That's always been a mystery of a verse there, because they don't have a conscience. They don't have, but God's going to make them be required of that. You know why? Because his life, God's life, his gift of life is precious. It's not to be fooled with. I watched a video last night, and I said, look at these idiots. They're up on those skyscrapers, 50, 60 stories up, and they're jumping from roof to roof, and they're daredevils, they call them. I said, the last guy did that over there in Hong Kong or Indonesia, dropped off, missed the curb, and fell off and plummeted to his death. Trivial with their life. Life is required of us. God gives us life, and that life has to be answered for. God is at this point. He took all the livestock. Hail and fire falls like never before seen. And it's ratcheting up to the next level. And then you get to this where he says, the hail and the fire destroy most of the crops, most of the plants, most of the vegetation. But just in case I missed anything, now I'm going to finish you off, and I'm going to send what?
Locusts.
I'm going to bring the locusts in. And they didn't leave nothing. Now you're at conclusion stage. Life and death is imparted. Future is at stake. What do you do if there's nothing to eat? There's no animals to eat. There's no vegetation to eat. What do? You die. But now here's God's mercy. You read that little verse there, and he says, but the grain and the barley had not come up yet. That's nothing else but an act of God, of mercy. He makes the way for the Egyptians. After he destroyed the rye and the other crops, he allows for the grain and the barley to come up after in that. So he sends the locusts. Now we're at stage 8. Now I don't know about you, but as I'm counting down, now I'm getting worried. Now again, I'm not here. I'm just reading an account of who God is and the activity of God. But I see the same thing parallel. We're at stage 8. We're at plague 8. And the next plague that comes is 3 days of darkness. Not just darkness where you say, oh, I'm going to turn the lights off and save on the electric bill. Oh, that's all right. The sun's coming up in the morning. I'll just wait till daylight. I'll go to bed early. Remember those days where people went to bed with the chickens, as they say, and got up with the chickens? They went when the sun... I only knew one person all my life that lived like that, old Emma Bizer. When the sun set, she was heading to bed, and when the sun come up, she was getting up. She lived by that. She didn't have clocks. She didn't have cell phones and all that stuff. She just lived in simplicity. Y'all remember those days? Vaguely. Darkness that could be felt. I see that, and I hear about that. I just read a report in Afghanistan, is that they have no reports of any Christian churches at all. I remember Tom Mellop, when he was working for IMB, International Mission, and he went into India, and one of the places that he went in, he said we could not find one Christian witness. I don't know, we've got small groups, but again, 24,000 in Hampshire County, 3,000, 2,000 to 3,000 Christians, and I'm being kind, okay? True believers. You could still find a brother or sister in Christ. You could still find a church, couldn't you? But to go to a place and there's nothing, what does that even look like? You say, well, we're so ungodly and so perverse and so evil, and that's true, but I can find brothers and sisters. I can't imagine not finding a church or a brother or sister, none. Darkness that can be felt. You ever see somebody that was so evil that they resonated, vibrated evil off of them? I just looked at them and I said, now that is a pawn or an agent of Satan right there. Their language was coarse. Their mood was sour, evil. They walk around just like a demented stage in their life, the way they was presenting themselves, saying that person has never known joy or love, the fruits of the Spirit, or peace, constantly tormented. Our connotations of Satan. Did you ever think about what Satan looks like and acts like? People, media, Hollywood, whatever, always portray Satan as, remember when he was George Burns? He was God and the devil. Like he was a hipster, like he was cool, like he was, having a good time and all this. Satan is working with a vengeance. How can Satan, who knows not what love is, joy is, peace is, long-suffering, goodness, kindness, or any of the fruits of the Spirit, how can he know what those are? Because those have all been pulled away from him. He works with a vendetta. He works with a hate. He works with a vengeance because he knows his time is short, and his only thing is destruction and lies and murder. That's what he does. He knows nothing of goodness. He knows nothing of having a good time or enjoying a little bit of life. Well, this is just my little slice of heaven. This is just my little piece of heaven. He knows nothing of that. He is one of the most miserable creatures that God ever created because God is withdrawn from him completely. That's Afghanistan. That's that place in India where there's not one Christian witness. It is the darkness that can be felt. It is the abandonment inside of a home where the father and the mother, the husband and the wife, and all the children that follow are in complete lostness. And they know nothing of God, nor fear of God. They are in this darkness of existence, but never knowing what life is really all about. These are people that you and I are crying out to God for. One, don't let it be me. Don't let it be my loved ones. But God, more importantly, may you help us in this day and hour to see a rescue that only you can do. But now you're at stage 9. You're at plague number 9. And the next one's coming, the one that seals the deal. Now we're at 8. And again, I'm just estimating. We've long passed the inconveniences of flies and frogs and lice. And matter of fact, the calamities and the judgments are so severe upon us now that we almost wish that we had lice. Boy, I'd rather I had a mouthful of flies. Because at least I knew that wasn't life-threatening, it's the inconvenience, it was a distortion of thing. But I could get through that, but man needs. Hail and fire, darkness, the locust that's left everything. California, I'll show you the pictures here next week. I'll try to have them up. No green whatsoever. We had to laugh. We went to the place that the front yard of the house that we was at. It was the green thing. Now I knew, I've known enough about grass and weeds and all that stuff. And the guy was with me. He said, "Oh, look at that!" And I said, "Yeah, it's the only guy I know that has putt-putt golf on his front yard." It was artificial grass that they had laid. But unless they were watering their yard, which they weren't supposed to be doing, and you saw green grass, it was fake. It was turf. And they had laid it out that way. Because everything else was just as brown and dead. But again, there's still vegetation, but the locusts come through, everything is removed. And now you're at calamity. You're at crisis hour. I'm worried about this. Not for myself. And I say this so often, not for myself, because blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, for a foretaste of glory is mine. I love to tell the story. It'll be my great joy in heaven to tell the great testimony and story. That's not what I'm worried about. Again, empathy is that great desire and compassion on others' behalf. Surely you understand, your loved ones will not make it through this. They are the Egyptians. They are Pharaoh. Their hearts have been hard. Hey, come go to church with me. No. Hey, let's sit down and study some scriptures. Let's read our Bible. No. Can I pray with you? Don't bother me. Don't bring up that Jesus thing to me. They are as coarse and unbelieving as Pharaoh was. Remember what Pharaoh said to Moses? If I see you one more time, I'm going to kill you. And Moses, angry with him, because again, God kept sending him. And he says, "You're out of your own mouth. Out of your own mouth. You just said it. And now God's going to take that which is most precious to you, your firstborn. And from the top to the bottom, and the end, God did not leave one untouched. Unless what? He saw the blood over the one, the Passover. And God passes over. God passes over Hampshire County. God passes over your home. God passes over our state, our nation, and that. What's he looking for? He's looking for the blood. Does the blood of Jesus Christ cover you? Is the blood of Jesus Christ upon our children, upon our grandchildren, upon our family, upon our neighbors, upon our friends? You look around, I go to work, I see my neighbors, I'm getting ready for church, ready to worship the Lord, and I see people running in and out of tractor farm and fleeing, no regards for the day, no fear of God on the Lord's day at all. And I cringe because we're escalating, constricting. It goes from inconveniences to life and death to death. And we're right there now at this, that we are now dying faster than that we are living in the United States. It's at that stage. And so a plea, a prayer, for us to understand the plagues of Egypt. Although a Bible account of the Old Testament, yeah, dismiss it that way. Did you really understand that we're living it? I could sit down and write the 10 plagues of the United States for here. And it's the same thing. We've hardened our heart. The Lord sent the prophets. We didn't listen to them. Our nation legalized everything that God said don't do. And the church, the greatest culprit of all, the church, when you presented this to them, said, not interested, don't care, don't bother me. And they dismissed it away. And God says, okay, therefore, because of the hardness of your heart, what comes next? The next plague. Time and time again, knowing that God was sending us a message, sending a plague to get us to come back to Him, to respond to Him. Had all the signs right in front of us. Had everything happening right in front of us to tell us. We had the Bible truths, God consistency, the same God yesterday, today, and forever. And He's doing it again. And here we are in this plight right now. And everything's at stake. You know, that revival conference, the one thing I come out of that, they're all preaching about the next great spiritual awakening, the next great spiritual revival that's going to go worldwide. And I do believe in that. But I was left with this question. I wonder if God sends revival everywhere but here. It happens everywhere else in the world. To those, especially in that 1041 that never had an opportunity. But we, who had so much time, so much opportunity, and God says, not you. You squandered what I gave you. You missed the moment. I sent the plagues. You wouldn't respond. You ain't no better than Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And God says, where they had nothing in the other nations, and you had everything, now they'll have everything, and you'll have nothing. And a thought that was left with me on that is to say, I've always prayed that. I've always just said, Lord, I do believe revival's coming. I think God birthed that within our hearts for a reason, and prayer is the means of that. But I'm wondering that if God says, no, they had judgment, you had the opportunity for revival, now they'll have revival, and you'll have judgment. You missed the time of your appointment. I don't know how God's going to work it out. You know, it's fun to batter around with certain brothers and sisters about that. I don't know what God's going to do, but I do know this. Of the 10 plagues of Egypt, when God kept constricting on them, He affected their outward signs of their living. He affected their bodies. And then He ultimately took their life. We're in that last stage. With all the shootings and drug overdose deaths and the abortions, death is a natural norm for us in this nation, isn't it? Baltimore, one person killed every night. Chicago, 2 people killed every day. On our streets. But see, we've become so used to it. It doesn't bother us no more. Let one person get killed in Hampshire County every day. Do you think red flags would go up then? Oh, what's going on? We've never seen it like this. What's been happening? We just don't put our finger on it to understand that God is calling us. Your time is running out, and you better get back to me while you still can. And again, why? Their eternity is at stake. And so there's our opportunity right now, pleading with God for this day, that revival would come, that He wouldn't pass us by. You know that song, "Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior"? Hear my humble cry, while on others are calling. God, please don't pass me by. And I think America and the American church better be praying the same thing. Please, God, don't pass me by. So the judgments is the same as the plagues in the book of